Good afternoon. Let's get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the May 7th hearings before the Baltimore Municipal and Zoning Appeals Board. A few preliminary items before we get started. Please turn off all cell phones or other devices that make any noise. Not only are they disruptive to the proceedings that we have here today, but they also interfere with the recordation of the proceedings. And you can see there's various cameras and microphones, and the devices do interfere with those. We're going to call the cases generally as they appear on the docket today. When we call your case, please come up. The appellant will stand to my left. Anyone in opposition will stand to my right. The way the procedure will be today, that the appellant will state his or her case. The opposition will have the opportunity to state his or her opposition. Then the appellant will have the opportunity to address the points made by the opposition, and that will end the proceeding. We're not going to be going back and forth and back and forth. We will vote on the appeals heard today generally at the end of the docket, although we are going to vary for that for one case, which you'll soon hear about. So anyone who wishes to stay and hear our deliberations certainly can. Otherwise, if you want to experience a really beautiful afternoon, you can call our office tomorrow and get our decision, and that number is 410-396-4301. I'll say that again if anyone's writing it down, 410-396-4301. We have two cases for which opposition is signed in, and what I'd like to do is I'm going to call that case. You don't have to come up, just stand up. We have found that if people sometimes talk, you can resolve your differences. I will note that this board will make a decision based upon the applicable zoning code provisions, but it does help for people to talk because sometimes differences can be resolved. First case for which opposition is signed in is 2018-333, 701 South Bond Street. Have you guys had a chance to talk?
We offered to meet and
Yeah, I spoke with this gentleman and explained my position, and we agreed there was no need to talk further, so I'm happy to.
We'll call the case then. Thank you. Next case, 2019-16, 6002 Rusk Avenue.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Are you the appellants?
We're the opposition.
You're in opposition. Who's the appellant?
Steps outside, please.
Okay.
Well, we have spoken.
Is any additional talk? Okay, we'll call your case then. All right. Next, we're going to call a series of cases for which the zoning board has sufficient information in the file to approve your case. I'm going to call a series of cases together, and what I'd like you to do is line up, starting at, again, my left, and line up this way in the order that I call the cases. First case is 2019-74, 115 West Homburg Street, Alex Mandel. Next case, 2019-93, 824 Mangold Street. Are you for Hamburg Street?
Oh, I thought you said Mangold.
I did. You're second. I want to
Oh, I'm
line
sorry.
up in the order that I call you.
Okay.
So you'll be lining up
Behind
down
you.
this. 2019-96, 2300 Whitley Road. Thirty-five hundred Chestnut Avenue. Twenty 2019-113, 2005 Bank Street. Okay. 2019-115, 136 South Highland Avenue. Twenty 2019-121, 4301 to 4315 Marble Hall Road. 2019-122, 4200 to 4214 Lock Raven Boulevard. 2019-123, 4216 to 4230 Lock Raven Boulevard. And the last case on the consent docket is 2019-126, 1214 to 1216 Bayard Street. Yes. Let's get everybody sworn in who's going to provide testimony.
Raise your right hands, please. You swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
First case, 2019-74, 115 West Halmbarg Street.
Good afternoon, Justin Williams on behalf of the applicant, Hamburg Street Apartments LLC.
And Mr. Williams, we have this to construct 5-story building with 33 dwelling units. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do we have any staff reports?
Thank you. Martin French for the Baltimore City Planning Department. Planning Department has reviewed this application and recommends approval, subject to the condition that the proposed improvements are completed in accordance with an authorization to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation and with requirements of the Baltimore City Landscape Manual. This property is located in the Sharp-Leadenhall Historic District, and therefore the final decision on the size of the building is going to be made by CHAP. Thank you.
And Mr. Williams, are those conditions acceptable to your client?
They are.
Good. Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Application, folder full of exhibits and letters of support from the community.
Great. Thank you very much. 2019-93, 824 Mangold Street. State your name, please.
Michael Schock?
Mr. Schock, we have this to construct 2-story rear additions, correct?
That's correct.
And staff reports.
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Schock, the zoning board has sufficient information to approve your appeal. Do you have any questions?
No, sir.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
2019-96, 2300 Whitley Road.
So unfortunately, we have some opposition and trying to work out an agreement, but have to pull ourselves off of the consent docket.
Okay. I wasn't aware there was opposition signed in. We'll call your case in turn.
Thank you.
Okay. Next case, 2019-111, 3500 Chestnut Avenue. Okay. Next, 2019-113, 2005 Bank Street.
Good afternoon.
State your name, please.
Nate Prettle.
Mr. Prato, we have this to demo first floor rear, construct 3-story rear addition. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Staff reports?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Prato, zoning board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next case, 2019-115, 136 South Highland Avenue. Good afternoon.
Hi,
You state your name, please.
Jimmy Curtis.
Mr. Curtis, we have this to construct second floor rear deck attaching front building to rear building. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good. Do we have staff reports?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Mr. Curtis, zoning board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you. 2019-121, 4301 to 4315 Marble Hall Road.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. State your name, please. I'm going to call these three cases together because you're here for all three.
Scott Freeman.
Second case is 2019-122, 4200 to 4214 Lock Raven Boulevard. Third case is 2019-123, 4216 to 4230 Lock Raven Boulevard. And Mr. Freeman, you're here for all three cases?
Correct.
And all three cases are to erect an 8-foot-high perimeter fence. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Correct. Staff reports?
Planning Department has no comment on these applications.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Freeman, we, the zoning board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. And finally, 2019-126, 1214 to 1216 Bayard Street.
Nate Prettle, here with Brian Parker, the property owner.
Mr. Prato, we have this to use as 3 units. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Great. Staff reports?
Planning Department has reviewed this application and has no objection. Thank you.
Prato, zoning board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to our regular docket. First case is 2018-333-701 South Bond Street. Let's get everybody sworn in. Who's going to provide testimony?
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good. State your name, please.
Yeah, Alfred W. Barry, AB Associates for the applicant.
Mr. Barry, we have this to use second and third floors as private social club for the use of prescription medical cannabis. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we've heard this case before we were here because we've had it noticed. We had the posting one more time. We wanted to give the neighborhood and the community a full opportunity to understand what was going on here. And I see we do have opposition here today. So we don't need to go through the entire case again. Do we have staff reports, additional staff reports?
No additional comment at this time from the planning
Baumgartner?
department. Thank you.
We do, Mr. Chairman. The board asked staff to reach out to several different city departments. We heard back from the Baltimore City Police Department. They had several concerns about security. They offered the following information for the board's consideration. That there's adequate lighting and security cameras, that those security cameras are linked to the Baltimore City Watch system. They offered that similar to a liquor establishment or a bar or a tavern, there are concerns about driving after the use of medical cannabis, and that the board should, if the board approves this application, they should apply conditions similar to that of a tavern or a bar. They also offered that there should be no storage on site of any kind of cannabis and or paraphernalia for that use. They offered that there should be no guests allowed and that everyone in the facility be a registered medical cannabis patient. They offered that quantity limits should be put in place in terms of the amount of medical cannabis that anyone can have with them at any given time. They also recommended some kind of class for employees, similar to something like a TAM class that would be given to bars and restaurants about overusing either medical cannabis and or alcohol from the bar downstairs. We also heard back from the Department of Housing. They had similar concerns about the use, but they had no formal objection to the use. And then the applicant themselves had a number of conditions that they had offered up, and this was put into the record when we heard this, actually I think twice at this point, but just as a refresher, they're offering that all members and staff are required to be active registered patients with the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. All members must comply with the bylaws of the social club as submitted to the board. No persons other than active members currently registered with MMCC will be permitted to enter the establishment. The social club will be limited to the second and third floor of the premises. The social club will have a defined separate entrance and separation from the existing tavern on the first floor. Property owner will amend the existing liquor license to remove the ability to serve alcohol on the second and third floors. The lobby area will be staffed with a receptionist at all times who will verify members' status with the social club as well as with the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. The operator or building owner will install additional cameras and exterior lighting. The cameras will be linked to the Baltimore City City Watch program. No marijuana will be stored or sold at the establishment or anywhere on the premises. The social club will comply with the city and state's clean indoor air regulations, and the social club will not be open past the current hours of the existing tavern, which closes at 2 a.m.
Okay. And Mr. Berry, the conditions from the police department, if we were to approve this, are they acceptable to your client?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Let me hear from your opposition. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Sure. My name's Brooke Hindmash.
And tell us about your opposition.
Absolutely. I'm a resident of the same block of buildings as the Sir Duke establishment, which is the current tavern. If it's helpful, I've printed a map that shows the proximity of my home to the establishment.
Okay.
So it would be an area of less than 100 feet. I live there. We own our home. I live there with my husband and my 15-month-old daughter. This is a family neighborhood. I would prefer it that we did not approve the rezoning of this property for a social medical cannabis club. I know that this group has made presentations to the local community members through the Fells Point Residential Committee. I was not aware of those conversations and was not able to participate at the most recent one, which was held last Wednesday. And I know that that group has approved or has given their endorsement for this business, but that committee doesn't speak for all of the residents of our area. And I'm here not only on behalf of myself, but also other community members. This is a letter written by my neighbor, Catherine Green Davis, from 708 South Bethel Street. She also would prefer that it was not approved.
Do you want us to make this in the map part of the record?
Yes, please. Furthermore, in just like a short period of time last evening, I took my daughter and did some door knocking on our street and in the block. And in that 30-minute time period, another 8 residents were willing to sign a piece of paper, a petition to say, please do not rezone this area. And I apologize that there is not more signatures there, but between working and looking after my daughter, I was only able to do a quick 30-minute door knock last night. So I feel like I speak certainly on my behalf and on the behalf of other members who live in very close proximity to this establishment to say that we do not support the rezoning and we would prefer that you did not approve it.
What are your specific concerns?
So I have multiple concerns around it. I think my primary concern is on the smell. I know that they say that there will be a clean air filtration system, but I haven't read anything that says that that will eliminate the smell. And I think that that would inhibit my family's ability to enjoy our backyard and our home with open windows. And as well, if there is some kind of smell, I worry about my daughter and myself and my husband breathing that in. I think at the same time, my other concern is on the people that it will bring to our community. I mean, this is a family area. I don't personally want people who are under the influence of cannabis to be walking our streets, driving cars, you know, where there are children and families around. And then finally, some of the concerns that my neighbors expressed to me last night was on concerns around crime. So they're concerned that this would bring people to the area and potentially under the influence of medical cannabis incite them to commit crimes in our neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have one question. With regard to the individuals who may be coming to the area, you mentioned under the influence. There are a number of liquor establishments in the area, is that correct?
Yes, there are bars and a few places to purchase alcohol, yes.
Do you discern any difference between an individual who may come to or leave from any of those establishments who may be under the influence? Any difference between that and medical cannabis that you're aware of?
I think people make their own decisions about whether or not they break the law and what their limits might be. I think many people come to our area and consume alcohol and take taxis home or walk home or do whatever they do. Some people, I'm sure, do drive drunk, which is a problem, but that's not the problem that this court is here to talk about. I want to avoid a situation where people are coming to our area to smoke medical cannabis and then potentially drive or be loitering in the area.
Okay. Mr. Berry?
Thank you, members of the board. As you all know, this has been one of the longest running zoning cases that I think I've been involved in, maybe the board's been involved in, and I think that's to the benefit of the board and benefit of your staff, which certainly saw this new use, proposed use, as something they wanted to deal with very carefully. And so both from an administration standpoint and also from a neighborhood standpoint, we've had 4 at least presentations to the Fells Point Community Association. I'm sorry this lady was not able to attend any of those, but the last one resulted in a unanimous vote of support for this, which is quite unusual within Fells Point, given the diversity within Fells Point and people on the same block, in fact, believe. So I would say that we've set a high bar for any of these that might want to come after. We know that we will be under a high degree of scrutiny. The bylaws that we've proposed, I suspect, will have to be amended to incorporate some of these conditions that the board may place on it today. We haven't really heard that other than what the recommendation from the police department, all of which we support and agree with. So I would hope that the board would consider this as a conditional use. It's not a rezoning. It is a social club which will have limited hours. It will have very strict controls. There was a full security presentation at the Fells Point Association, which I think, not to speak for everybody, but I have to believe that had a lot to do with their support of this in their neighborhood. We have the operators with me if there are any questions that you want to add anything about this, but we believe that we presented a case of how it met the conditional use standards back last year, and we hope that the board would support it and put reasonable conditions on it. One thing which we will absolutely do, if the board were to approve it, is give you the final bylaws incorporating your conditions no less than 30 days in advance of any of our openings, so that your staff would have a chance to review it and make sure that we're being in compliance with your conditions.
Great. Any questions from the board?
No.
Great, thank you all very much. We're going to vary our procedure just a tiny bit from what we normally do, and we're going to vote on this this particular appeal now, as a matter of fact. So off the record then.
I'm a yes if we incorporate all of the conditions we discussed earlier. The only other thing I would add is that I do have a concern that the smell could be a problem. It's not something that I really, and I do understand they're putting in ventilation, et cetera, but having been through this before in a couple of other situations, not having to do specifically with marijuana, but with other, one was a restaurant, et cetera, I do think it could impact the ability of the neighbors to enjoy their property, and I think it's something we have to keep close tabs on, and that if it becomes a problem, like we get a certain number of complaints, we have to bring them back in here.
Fine with that.
Yeah, I'm a yes too. In addition to the conditions that we've discussed, I'm basing my yes upon legal advice that we have the ability to approve this, and that the zoning code, we don't need to satisfy federal law in terms of granting a conditional approval. Okay. All right, we're back on the record with our docket. Now, I want to note, as everyone can see, there's 3 of us up here today. We are short 2 members. When there's only 3 of us, it's required that all 3 of us vote in favor of an appeal. So if anyone here would like to postpone, we will get you back into the next session if you would rather have the full board hear your appeal. Otherwise, we will move forward.
Come forward to postpone?
Sure. What's your case number?
2019-125, 7 East Madison Street.
Okay.
My name is Ryan Sturm, property owner.
Sturm.
Yeah, S-T-U-R-M.
Okay. 2019-125, 7 East Madison Street is postponed. Thank you.
Very much.
Hi. For 2019-94, request for postponement?
Yes.
Alyssa Domsel.
Yes, we were going to call, you were, okay, we thought you were postponing for reasons other than the 3, but we were going to.
Oh, that's correct. I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, your case is postponed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
For the record, 2019-94, 4301 to 4321 Park Heights Avenue, 4300 to 4320 Pimlico Road, and 2600 to 2614 Rosewood Avenue is postponed. Thank you. Okay, next case on our docket is 2019-16, 6002 Rusk Avenue.
Mr. McGann is getting Ms. Drew.
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman, I believe we have come to an agreement on the prior consent case for Whitley Road.
Oh, okay.
While we wait, we wanted to handle.
Well, they're here now. We'll call you in turn, Mr. Brettel. Okay, let's get everyone sworn in who's going to provide testimony.
I raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. Would you state?
I am.
Okay, I just didn't know if you need to be sworn in.
No, I will not.
You're an attorney, you're fine.
Thank you.
State your name for the record, please.
Lee Giroux.
And Mr. Rue, we have this to construct detached rear garage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. Do we have any staff reports?
Yes, we have a letter from Seth and Elizabeth Perlman. They are here. They will state their case.
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Mr. Rue, tell us about your project, or the
Okay.
project, I should say.
Make sure that you have a copy of the letter that came in late to me today as well. Does everyone have it? Okay.
Thank you.
Not really. He has one? You do? Okay, great.
What is the content of your letter?
Okay,
Ms. Drew?
this letter was generated by the owners, both the Crooks. Joe is standing to my right here, and his wife is not here today. Excuse me. And this is from the immediate neighbors, and there was also a neighborhood meeting that I encouraged them to go to since the last time that we were here. And the Cheswold Neighborhood Association generated this letter and sent it out late today. So I wanted to make sure that you had that. And the content of the letter basically is saying that they have no issues. 75% of the neighborhood who've been spoken to, and during the course of the meeting that they attended, that they're in agreement that the garage is something that they're considering approving.
Okay.
We also had conversations with both the Perlmans the last time we were here out in the hallway. Mr. Perlman is not here today, but Mrs. Perlman is to my left. And we still had some questions. We did try and work that out today. Prior to, we had a couple of things that we were discussing. The use of the garage. And on page 2 are the signatures that were generated by the immediate other neighbors. So that's the second page. And that was done by Mrs. Kruk.
Just one question. Were the neighbors who signed this letter on page 2 aware of the size of the garage?
Yes, they were.
That was part of your presentation?
Yes, it was. And they also discussed it in the Cheswold meeting. And I understand that Mrs. Perlman did not attend, or Mr. Perlman did not attend that meeting.
Thank you.
We discussed the meeting that was coming up from the last time we were here and before today, so that everyone had an opportunity to be invited and to go to the meeting and attend it.
Okay. So why do we need a 25-foot high garage?
Okay, I'm gonna let Joe talk. He's the owner. And
I want-
go ahead.
I'm looking for a 16-foot clear height so I can park an RV in there.
Your name, sir?
Joe Kruk,
How do you spell Kruk?
Kruk.
And how high is your RV?
Around 12 feet.
Okay. Okay.
And for the purpose of the height of the garage total from the, would be slab on grade to the rooftop peak, which would be a pitch of 912, would be 25. In the fire codes and also the building codes, we need to have a minimum of 7 3/4 ceilings. So the second floor, per se, would be for office later, potentially, and for storage, because they have a ranch home. And the basement right now is 330 square feet, which is not even a partial basement. Mr. and Mrs. Kruk are a young family, they're expanding, and they have a ranch home. So there's no storage and there's no office space for him to work. And understandably so, that he would need some space. So that's the purpose of having a little bit more storage upstairs above the vehicles. And the one vehicle he owns right now is a minimum of 8 feet is the one truck that would be side by side with the RV.
And I'm assuming we're talking about a home office?
A home office, right.
Okay. Let's hear from your opposition.
Good afternoon, everyone. Michael McCann on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Perlman. I'll have my client, Mrs. Perlman, who's here, talk about the letter and the interactions with the community. But I really wanted to focus the board in on the law, because this, I think, is one of those cases where it's necessary to do so. It may sound at first blush like a difficulty or a hardship to the applicant, but when we look at the law, I don't think it comes close to meeting the standards. As you know, Mr. Chairman, 15-308A tells us that the difficulty or hardship must be because of the particular physical surrounding shape or topographical conditions of the structure or the land, as distinguished from mere inconvenience. That because of language in that section is important. It essentially means that there must be some connection between the land itself, its shape, its topography, and the difficulty or hardship. There's no such connection in this case. There's nothing about this property itself that has any relationship with this 25-foot or the 15-foot height requirement. There's nothing about the land that causes the difficulty, and that's what that section requires. This is just a mere wish to have a big garage. And that language, unless we ignore it, requires us to look closely and look for this connection between the land and the difficulty or hardship. Here they too have nothing to do with each other, that is the 15-foot requirement and the land. If this was a completely different piece of property, any piece of property, and there was this 15-foot requirement, that may be a different story if there's a different piece of property. But this property in and of itself, there's nothing unique about it, and I have a copy of the lots in the neighborhood, which I'd like to hand the board if I could, just to show you the shape of the lot, first of all.
Do you want a copy of this made for the record?
Yes, please. I do have an extra
Okay,
for you,
thank
and
you.
I may give you an extra copy, Mr. Chairman.
Notwithstanding what the law says,
Yeah.
what's the issue? The appearance, or?
Yeah, I think Mrs. Perlman will do a better job than I of explaining where her property is in
No, and
relationship.
I mean, that's what I'm interested in hearing, just
Yeah.
because we obviously, I mean, we understand what the law says.
Okay. With that, I'll let my client speak rather than me. Why don't you come up?
If you could give me a little space. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Perlman. I live at 6000 Rusk Avenue, which is the immediate next door neighbor of 6002. There is one other house to the other side, 6004, which is vacant. My husband and I purchased 6000 Rusk Avenue in 1991. It's an old stone house built in the 1860s, which since then we have been slowly renovating with our own four hands. We're highly invested in this house and in the community. We lived we were sole residents there for a number of years. I took a job in Chicago for the last few years. Our plan is to return full-time to this house in 2 years, and after I retire. But in this intervening time period, we spend about 20 to 25% of our time in Baltimore in this house. As we look outside our back door, as we exit our house, as we go to our car on a daily basis, this garage is that they're proposing would be front and center to our view, and would substantially diminish our quality of life. This is a 40 by 35 foot garage. It's 25 feet high. This is very large and very difficult to screen using bushes and trees and so forth. And that, therefore, it provides us, we object to it on the appearance sake. There are a couple other areas that cause us some concern. The first is the guarantee that this will be used for only residential purposes. With a garage of that magnitude, which virtually mimics the size of the house that's in front of it, and then the house itself has generally 4 or 5 vehicles parked in front of it almost all the time. And so it's a concern of ours that this will be used for non-residential purposes, if not for the current owner, for subsequent owners. And so we don't want to set up this situation where we're constantly having to monitor this for non-residential use. The other concern is a little bit more difficult to express, but it's a concern with the way this whole process has been going forward. So we became aware of the desire to build this garage when a sign appeared in the front yard right next to the curb with a car or a truck or a van or whatever parked right in front of the sign for almost the entire 30 days that the sign was up there. We then came to the prior hearing on February the 12th. We had a conversation. It was a very productive conversation where we were encouraged to exchange our contact. So my husband and I gave all of our contact information to the owner of 6002. And then he said that he would send us his contact information by email, which was not forthcoming. In the discussion, we provided the letter that you have in your file. We were very frank about what our concerns were, and but since then there has been no discussion about the design of this garage. It could be a cube that's 25 feet high, as far as we know. We have not been given any information about that. So we're concerned about a lack of transparency and a lack of forthrightness and how this is being communicated. I think those are our basic concerns.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Because I know it's something you mentioned to me that I wanted you to convey to the board. There was mention today of an RV, a 12-foot RV apparently, and a home office as being the use of the garage. Have you ever heard anything about either of those things prior to today?
The RV, I heard something about that after the February 12th meeting, but I've never seen an RV parked in front of the house, and it wasn't an issue at the February the 12th meeting. The other concern, thank you for reminding me that with regard to the letter that I saw this morning about a signature of the surrounding what were called immediate neighbors. You may have a definition for immediacy, but really there were only 2 immediate neighbors who signed this petition, and they were both located behind the house. We are the neighbors to one side. The other neighbor to the other side is a vacant house. And we had a conversation with the Cheswell Neighborhood Association about the meeting that they held, and they indicated to us that they were never asked for a decision, and no decision had been made at that meeting. My husband has been a longstanding board member of the Cheswell Neighborhood Association, and this notation of getting 75% of the immediate neighbors is something that we likewise have not, this has not been something that we're familiar with.
And I would just note on this, the letter from the association, I think as Mr. Fields was suggesting, two things. There's no mention in this document about the height of the building. It just says it's to be 15 feet from the property line. The other thing that struck me is that the aerial that depicts the so-called immediate neighbors includes a lot of houses that are, even if you interpret immediate to mean not adjacent or adjoining, if you interpret it more broadly just to mean in the immediate area, there's a lot of houses, not a lot, but several houses that are not included, and I'm not so sure if you do the math, it's anywhere close to 75%, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to point that out about the letter. And then two more things. I know Ms. Strachan doesn't want me to talk about the law, but I just wanted to mention a couple things about the law.
You can talk about whatever
I know.
you want to talk about. I was just trying, I had a question specifically that I wanted addressed.
Yeah, I was just being facetious. I wanted to make 2 points. Number one, if this was an attached garage as opposed to a self-standing garage, it would be way too big. There's a provision in 15-511 which says that parking garage may not occupy more than 50% of the width of the front facade of the building. In other words, the garage can't be longer than 50% of the building itself. Here, the face of this house is 54 feet. The face of this garage is somewhere between 36 and 40 feet, depending on which way you turn it. I wanted to mention that. And then secondly, this is supposed to be an accessory structure. Accessory. This house is 1,800 square feet. The garage is going to be 1,400 square feet. The zoning regulations don't have a definition of accessory like, for instance, Baltimore County does, but I think under any plain meaning of accessory, something that is 3/4 the size of the principal structure is not really accessory, and certainly in size. And I think that math, 1,400 square feet in comparison to 1,800 feet of the house, I think is important, that this is just simply too big. With that, I'll let Lee have another.
Thank you.
Mr. Roof.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to address the use of the land. The use of the land itself is 30,483 square feet. So it's an extremely large lot. The neighbors to either side, there is a vacant home on the one side, but the neighbors who have been contacted have a direct vision of a structure to be built. And this structure is going to be built on the opposite side of the Perlmans. It's not going to be butting up against them directly. So that's not an accurate, basically a statement saying that, their line of vision is not going to be coming out of the home and seeing it directly every morning. The other thing that wasn't mentioned is that potentially we can put a fence up as well, if that would be something that in the future we could do. The existing garage right now cannot house the RV. And his vehicle that he has right now is the truck, is at least 8 feet, almost 9 feet tall. And that's one of these brand-new trucks, and we all know how large these big trucks, these F-150s have gotten, so as far as the height. So that's not practical. The other thing is having the space in the yard. I don't know, it's a little bit different than Baltimore County, and I agree that, the city has their own rules in Baltimore County, and Howard County, when we do variances, have their own rule about usage of the land. But here, I don't see it. I don't agree, respectfully, that this is an issue for land use. This is something that is practical. This is something for an expanding family. This is a young family who's going to be here for many years, and they're putting a lot of money into this garage. And the space is needed because they don't have the storage in the basement. And above, more than anything else, I know Joe has a business, and that's something, a home office you have to have when you have young children and they're going to bed and you're trying to talk on the phone and things like that. Having a separate space for office above where the trucks would be what the use would be. It's not for any other use. There's no other commercial use. There's nothing that we have not discussed in the last meeting, and I don't honestly understand why the Perlmans were not present, both of them at the Cheswell meeting, because that was the strongest suggestion I made last time we were here, that everyone get together, and that was an opportunity for everyone to be there, and everyone knew when the meeting was going to be because it was discussed in the hallway. So
Okay.
that's all I have.
Thank you.
Something
Any
else?
questions from the board?
No.
All right, thank you.
Lastly, Mr. Chairman, I did have some photographs, so I don't need to explain it. It's self-explanatory. If I could just get the board copies of the house itself. And the last picture is a copy of, rather a photograph of the view from the Perlman's house.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Derek, you have one for the record? Yeah. All right, next case is 2019-97, 5700 Newberry Street.
Do you want to call Nate back?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on one second, I'm sorry. 2019-96, 2300 Whitley Road. All right, let's get everybody sworn in who's going to provide testimony.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good. State your name, please, for the record.
Nate Predel here on behalf of Alan and Peggy Lazaro.
And Mr. Proto, we have this to construct new screened-in rear porch with rear deck. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we believe we've managed to work out an agreement with the adjacent property owners. The agreement is in regards to trees and where they'll be planted and what the cost of these trees will be. The details have not been finalized, but we're relatively confident they will be, and we'd ask the board to approve this subject to receiving this signed agreement between the applicant and the adjacent property owners. I would mention, should that you not receive that, we would come back and have a full hearing, and I don't know that I should get into the facts right now because we're pretty confident they will submit that agreement. And I hope that would be acceptable to the board.
When do you expect to have this agreement written and signed?
1 week.
Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we bring you back in 2 weeks?
Okay.
That way you'll have the agreement signed. You were on the consent doc. If you come back with the agreement, we'll put you back on the consent doc, and that way we know the wording of everything, and there won't be any confusion. Okay?
That's
So we'll
acceptable.
postpone this for,
Sure.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, now, 2019-97, 5700 Newberry Street.
Can you call that one more time? My thing didn't turn off.
Sure. Calling it again, 2019-97, 5700 Newberry Street.
That's us.
That's you. You state your name for the record, please.
Rob Frisch.
Mr. Frisch, we had this to add live entertainment to existing tavern/restaurant. Is that correct? Staff reports?
Pardon me. Planning Department has reviewed this application, noted that it specifically didn't have statements available for the Planning Department's review concerning sanitation, security, or off-street parking. However, the department is recommending approval of this application subject to these conditions, in addition to any conditions the board might establish in relation to those items. A copy of the use and occupancy permit for the premises must be kept on the premises and available for inspection by representatives of Baltimore City at all times. A copy of the written approval by the board of the live entertainment provided on the premises, including details of any restrictions or limitations on the live entertainment provided, must be kept on the premises and available for inspection by representatives of Baltimore City at all times. And a copy of all other permits and licenses required pursuant to the written approval of the board must be kept on the premises and available for inspection by representatives of Baltimore City at all times. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Frisch, if the board were to approve your appeal, are those conditions acceptable?
Absolutely.
Good. Tell us about what you're going to do here.
We're just looking to add a couple of acoustic guitars, nothing loud and amplified and that kind of stuff. Perhaps a piano player at brunch, piano player at wedding receptions, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I've got some 3 letters here of recommendation from the Village Business Association, a resident, as well as my backdoor neighbor, which is Rob Berry at Veterinarian Clinic.
And the hours of the live entertainment? That's probably in here, but
Yeah, there's not going to be any cover charges or anything like that. It would be over by like midnight, 12:30. We're not looking to go late. I mean,
Your application says 11.
11.
Plan to do it later than that?
That's fine. I mean, the only way it would is if it was a wedding or something like that that was booked till midnight, but we're not looking to become a nightclub by any stretch.
And the music won't be outside, it'll be inside.
Yeah, all inside.
okay. So As Ms. Strachan said, your application does say 11 a.m. Are you amending that to midnight?
I guess technically, but we plan midnight, or we plan 11. The only time it would go over would be for a wedding reception that went late.
Well, I'm
So
asking.
yeah, I guess yes.
Say yes.
Okay.
Any questions from the board?
No, sir.
Great. Thank you very much.
Be good. Thanks, guys.
Twenty 2019-107, 2214 East Pratt Street. Everyone here, let's get everybody sworn in. That's going to provide testimony.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, state your name for the record, please.
Virgil Bartram.
Mr. Bartram, we had this to house 1 dwelling unit and 5 rooming units. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do we have staff reports?
Basically, first, we have a letter from the Butchers Hill Association indicating that they support the proposal.
Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this property is contained within the Butchers Hill Historic District, and therefore, all exterior alterations, additions, et cetera, that might be involved with this application, if approved, would be subject to review and approval by CHAP. The department therefore recommends that approval of the application be subject to the condition that all exterior changes, including additions, demolitions, and alterations, are completed in accordance with an authorization to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bartram, if we were to approve this, are those conditions acceptable to your clients?
Yes.
All right. So tell us about your project.
Let's see, first of all, I don't know if there's a question about the posting. I do have the certificate here. I misunderstood and didn't get it.
We didn't have a question about the posting. If you
So
want to
just-
talk to us about that, we will.
No,
Otherwise,
not necessary
you don't have to.
then. Okay, just to make sure.
You can submit that, though, if you,
May I submit that?
thanks, sir.
So that's correct. Noel and Serene, the property owners, are here, and they were actually out of the country for about 12 years. There are 2 buildings on this property, a very large 3,600 square feet on the 3 floors property that they lived in before they were away working on healthcare in Africa. And in that time, they had 2 neighbors managing the property, and at that time they decided to rent it as rooming units. The property was multifamily, 3 units total, 2 in the back building and 1 in the front building. And while they were away, the property managers found that they could rent the property more readily as rooming units. And so it had been inspected for 12 years by the Department of Housing as a multifamily unit, and gave us knowledge of Housing Department. So when they came back, they decided, Mr. Brown is retired, he decided to downsize and said, I'm their architect. We renovated the property last year. We're now up for a Baltimore Heritage Preservation Award on the carriage house. It's the second one for the property. The main house had a Baltimore Heritage Award. So they are now living in the carriage house building that they downzoned from 2 units to 1, and they'd like to continue to house it as 5 rooming units.
Okay.
I wasn't aware, I thought perhaps we were certainly hoping to be on the consent docket. I don't know exactly how to advise my clients. If there are 6 people living in this property now and it's turned down, should we postpone?
Well, we can't tell you how we're going to rule.
Okay, I don't know.
Are there any questions from the board?
I don't have any questions.
Do we have any questions about the calculations of?
I was just curious, is the carriage house detached from the rooming house entirely?
It is entirely detached, yes.
Okay. And the side, okay, thank you. That's all.
Do you have the plans?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
2019-109, 12 West Montgomery Street. Gretel, you've already been sworn in. We have this to use first floor rear as cafe, is that correct?
That is correct.
Staff reports?
Yes. First, we have a letter from a resident, Robert R. Gisrael, representative of 105 West Hughes Street, to bring up several points that will be repeated in another letter. They've also supplied some photographs, so I guess you can look at those while I read this. The one writer writes, I live at 21 West Hughes Street, next door to 12 West Montgomery. I am shocked to learn about a cafe idea, and I think it is a bad idea for many reasons. When the building was sold, we met with the developer, Brendan, because we were concerned about our common wall. He assured us that the first floor would have a small office and the rest parking. There would be an additional 3 parking spaces at the 7-Eleven on Hanover Street. Very surprised that there are only 3 parking spaces and now maybe 0. Parking is difficult on our street, and we are concerned about the noise and cars trying to stop and pick up coffee and food. Their trash and recycling currently outside is an eyesore. They should be forced to bring that indoors. I won't be able to attend the hearing, but wanted to share my concerns with you. Another writer writes, we are also a household that would be directly impacted by the cafe. In addition to the reasons given, Hughes Street is already a traffic problem as it is a direct route out of the city. It is already a problem area for vandalism to cars and property because of pedestrian traffic. We also have essentially a petition from 10 people in favor. They write this variance would bring a welcome spot for neighbors to gather what they lost 1 year ago. That's the end of my
We're
reports.
talking about the closing of Metropolitan Coffee House, which is right around the corner.
Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this proposed use would comply with the urban renewal plan that covers this particular area. The department is recommending approval of the application. Thank you.
So, but the entrance to the cafe is not gonna be on actually Montgomery, it's on Hughes, right?
It's on Hughes Street, which is a public right-of-way, not an alley. It's a named street, if you're referring to the standards for neighborhood commercial establishment.
No, I just was curious.
That's correct. So,
Mr. Brettel?
the proposal here is to use the rear of an existing office and residential building at 12 West Montgomery, known as, I assume, 11 West Hughes Street, as a cafe. The structure, as is, was redeveloped by Chasen Design Construction Development roughly a year ago and houses a co-working space called Vision. There's been many articles about it. The Business Journal did a feature. It's really a wonderful place where people can rent smaller offices for a limited amount of time. There are also 2 residential units. Mr. Baumgartner had asked me a question about this earlier today, and I mistakenly gave you an answer of 6. There actually are only 2 dwelling units, and there's an occupancy permit that reflects that. The way the building functions right now, and I can hand a picture to the board, this is the space that will be used for the cafe. Right now, it's exactly as it looks, except where the vantage point for the picture is a small coffee bar for the tenants, for the residential space as well as the office tenants, to go get their own coffee. The only change is essentially they have an operator. They're creating their own coffee operating entity, which will sell coffee instead of give it away for free, and it will also be open to the public along Hughes Street. There's no change to the parking arrangement. There is a small parking pad. There's 1 off-street parking space required. That's not changing at all and will remain. The operator, and I also have an email, I can provide more information, but it has 11 secured parking spots about a half block away along Hughes Street at Charles Street. And that's, and I'd urge the board to approve the appeal. It's a wonderful space, and I think this will be a welcome addition to the neighborhood.
Any questions? No. Great, thank you very much. I'm gonna call again, 2019-111, 3500 Chestnut Avenue. Next case, 2019-112, 3004 Liberty Heights Avenue. Okay, we will get you all sworn in a second.
raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Make sure you guys use the microphones, whoever's speaking.
Who's the spokesman? Can you state
I
your
am.
name for the record, please?
Min Kim.
Kim?
Yep.
Mr. Kim, we have this to use premises for motor vehicle servicing, window repair, and tinting and headlight restoration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, do we have any staff reports?
Yes. Planning Department reviewed this application, had to consider whether the description that was contained in the application is consistent with the the definition of motor vehicle service and repair minor, which is contained in the zoning code. And part of the definition of that particular land use is replacement or adjustment of light bulbs and fuses. And this appeared to overlap the description in the application for repairing headlights and things of that nature. For that reason, the department considered this inconsistent with the C1 zoning of the property, which does not allow motor vehicle service and repair minor, and is therefore recommending disapproval of this application. Thank you.
Mr. Kim, you've heard from the planning department. I'd like you to address your position on this.
So one quick question on that is, for the automobile repair minor, does that consider for the fuse and or light bulb repairment? Because our majority of our work is actually based on window tinting. So if that restoration part that's gonna be inflicting disapproval for the zoning, we could completely not service the restoration or the light bulb and could just continue with the window tinting.
So, Mr. Baumgartner, I'll ask you.
That's a tough call. So, automotive or motor vehicle repair minor, there's only two ways to distinguish that in the zoning code: minor and major, right? So major are major engine rebuilds, things of that nature. Everything else is basically minor. In a C1 district, the idea, you'd still be bringing vehicles on and off the property for window tinting, correct?
Correct.
So it's fortunately, it's essentially the same type of use as other automotive minor, like oil changes. The actual work being done is a little different because you're not, working with oil necessarily. You're doing however window tinting is done. But since the code itself only distinguishes between major and minor, there's little else to give the board any guidance in the zoning code as to whether or not this particular business would fall under anything other than minor. If there was something, including Mr. Garza, if there was another zoning category that maybe this might be included under, I'm sure the board could hear that testimony, but just off the cuff, I can't think of any.
Okay.
And also, as our glazed window tinting, we actually been at exact same neighborhood. We were actually right next door for over 3-4 how many years, and we were actually looking to place to move because our current landlord purchased the building and they're renovating, and we actually were pretty much forced to move out. And the property next door was empty and has open garage, fully built for automobile service, which we just found out that zoning has changed and is not permitted. But we were pretty much we had to make the choice to move because we lost our position to operate our old building. And this building already has full garage and it's ready for our service. If we were to change to something else, I believe they will have to build a whole new construction.
Well, as you've heard, it appears that the C1 zoning, where 3004 Liberty Heights Avenue is located in, just doesn't provide for even minor automotive repairs, which we, at least I believe is window tinting and repair would fall under. Now, the board will consider this, the board will vote. If you would like to postpone this, to do a little more research, or to come back with some rationale for us, we would certainly entertain a postponement, or not.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it doesn't really inform the board, but it might make the applicants maybe feel a little bit better. But it's a somewhat common occurrence in a C1 district to have existing automotive uses for decades and decades and decades. The problem is when those businesses shut down, they're what's called a lawful non-conforming use. So as long as those automotive businesses stay operating, they can.
In the same location.
Exactly. So I think this, and just looking at the zoning map, this corridor, Reisterstown Road corridor, there are other corridors that are zoned C1 and just have had automotive businesses for a long time. But again, the problem is then moving locations, or if a business were to stop operating for 12 months. So again, I don't know if that makes you feel any better or not, but it's a common occurrence given the C1 zoning.
So, Ms. Kim, I leave it up to you. You can either postpone or we can make a decision today. But I will need you to make a decision.
I think we will take whatever decision. If you could just consider, this is the family business that we've been operating for many years.
All right, so we'll roll on. Any questions from the board? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next case, and we're going to call two together, 2019-114, 1710 Light Street, and 2019-117, 1710 Light Street.
Just raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm.
Okay, you state your name for the record.
Eliza Hertzmark.
Ms. Hertzmark, we have this to subdivide into two lots and construct two-story rear addition, new third floor and rear and rooftop decks onto original building to remain as 1710 Light Street, and also to subdivide into two lots and construct two-story rear addition, new third floor rear and rooftop decks onto existing building to be known as 1707 Marshall Street.
Correct.
Do we have any staff reports?
Yes, thank you. Planning Department has reviewed both of these applications, which relate to the same property at the moment, which is proposed to be subdivided. There is a precedent for this type of subdivision of property on Light Street specifically. The board considered an application of a few months back, I believe, in the 1400 block of Light Street with a similar proposal that the rear of the property on Marshall Street would be divided off as a separate lot from the property's original larger building on Light Street. The department notes that subdivision is an action that requires approval by the Planning Commission, and therefore there needs to be a subdivision plan and a development plan approved by the Planning Commission in the course of finalizing this proposed change. The department is recommending approval of the application be subject to the condition that the lot split or subdivision and all construction, alterations, and improvements are completed in accordance with the subdivision plan and development plan approved by the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Ms. Hertzmark, if we were to approve your appeal, are those conditions acceptable to you?
Yes.
Okay, well, tell us about your project.
So as Mr. French was saying, it's one existing property at 1710 Light Street, and the proposal is to subdivide it down the middle to have a new property, one fronting on 1710 Light Street and the other one facing Marshall Street. The property is zone R8, and the site area right now is about 1,800 square feet. There are two existing structures. There's an existing two-story structure facing Light Street, and that structure will remain. There's an existing two-story structure facing Marshall Street, which will also remain with its existing garage. And the proposal is to take the Light Street building and do some demolition and rebuilding of parts of the building that are there, plus to add on to it with additions and including rear deck and steps up to a proposed rooftop deck. And for the 1710 Light Street, we're requiring a few variances for lot coverage, impervious surface, rear yard, and parking. The parking requirement is because the existing house right now, the Marshall Street garage effectively is that parking space, so we'll be subdividing that off and not providing new parking for the Light Street property. Then the Marshall Street property, the existing structure will remain, and there will be additions, a second floor addition, a third floor addition, and a roof deck as well, and second and third floor rear balconies. So for that one, we'll need variances for lot coverage, impervious surface, and rear yard. So we did, I'd like to point out some of the unique features of the property. We did a survey of the property, and the property itself is only 15 feet wide, but the actual existing buildings there are even less than that. The existing building fronting on Light Street is 14.2 feet wide, and the one fronting on Marshall is 14.7 feet wide. And as we know, that's pretty narrow for a residential property. So one of the hardships of redeveloping this property is making sure that there's sufficient space that the housing market would require. And so that's necessitating the need for rear additions onto both of these properties. It's due to the existing narrow width of the lot and the buildings, we need to make up more space in the length of the houses. There is precedent in this block for this type of subdivision, and I'll just submit the block back here. With our property is highlighted, but you can see that there are several properties to the north that are new lots facing Marshall Street, and to the south, there are also several properties that have been subdivided with lots facing Light Street and lots facing Marshall Street. So this is fitting in with the development of this neighborhood. The developer, Mateus Andrus here, is very invested in this neighborhood. He has multiple properties that were vacant and that he's redeveloping and are being built for occupancy. In addition to the rear and the coverage and the surface variances that we need, which, as I explained, is due to the narrow width of the lots, we are also asking for a parking variance for the Light Street property. And so I would like to point out two things in support of that variance. One is that this street does not have restricted permit parking, which indicates that there is in general sufficient parking to meet the residential needs. There's no need for specific permit parking. And then two, there's an existing bus line on Light Street and actually has stops at both of the immediate intersections, north at Heath Street and south at Barney Street. So somebody people who are accessing this property without a vehicle, is very possible to use existing public transportation infrastructure.
Where does Area 30 parking stop?
Area.
So Light Street, I'm just wondering where the parking.
I actually think I was looking at City View where it stops. It stops, I think, maybe it's 1 block north of it.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly.
What is the building immediately to the northeast of this particular lot? Looks like a large.
On Light Street?
Yes.
So it's another project actually that CMR is working on. I don't know exactly what the use is, but it's actually pretty much almost fully constructed. I did have a photo of it.
Just looking at the satellite.
Are you aware of what that? You can. You have to be sworn in to speak, or state your name. Sorry.
Yeah,
No, you did. Sorry, just state your name.
Mateus Andros, by the way. Hi. So the building in question is basically an apartment building being constructed with a garage door literally to the right of my door. If you're facing my door, there's a nice big garage door there. for the residents of that building. I'm not 100% sure if it's going to be rental or condos, but I believe it's rentals. I know the owner, and the owner has a similar structure somewhere else, and basically he's done the same thing multiple times.
Okay.
So
Why I asked is that in this kind of older satellite photo we have, it looks like the building was either vacant or a lot of demo was being done on it. There are a number of second floor windows that would be effectively blocked off by this construction. So I was just curious if that property owner knew that, 3 windows would have a wall attached to it. But if that's under redevelopment, that's not an issue.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. Next, 2019-116, 1909 Greenmount Avenue. Good afternoon.
How you doing, sir?
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
State your name for the record, please.
Mamadou Saul.
I'm sorry, your last name?
Saul, S-A-L-L.
Okay, Mr. Saul, we have this to use as first floor as carry-out food shop. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And do we have staff reports?
Yes, we have a letter from the Greater Greenmount Community Association. Let's see, it's dated May 6th. They write that they had fruitful discussions with Mr. Saul and are arranging and have had a follow-up meeting, but because there are still issues left to be resolved, they request that the hearing be postponed to a later date.
Mr. Henry, I'm sorry, who is that letter from?
The Greater Greenmount Community Association.
Okay.
What's the date on that letter?
May 6th.
Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that there may be concerns in the community, and recommends that approval of the application, if granted, be subject to conditions agreed to by the applicant and the community concerning operation of the proposed use. Thank you.
Okay. Have you had a chance to talk to the community?
Yes.
Well, it appears from that letter that you have not.
Yeah, we met up, I think the 3rd, and then they wanted to have a follow-up meeting with the police officer or something. Then she said she was gonna request a postponement.
Okay.
So,
Let me ask you, would you like to postpone this to be able to try to work through with the community, any concerns, and come back here in 2 weeks? Or we can hear today.
okay, we get a postponement.
Okay.
2 weeks.
Great, thank you. 2019-116, 1909 Greenmount Avenue is postponed. 2019-118, 4120 to 4122 West Belvedere Avenue. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Harold Arnold.
And Mr. Arnold, we have this to construct new garage with 6 trailers and continue to use as tire repair shop, correct?
It doesn't sound right. We're constructing new garage. The trailers are already there. I mean, right now it's a lot with trailers, and we're going to put one garage there and add it.
Okay, but you want to continue the trailers?
Yeah, it's trailer. Yeah, they store tires on it. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department reviewed this application. The aerial photograph, which the Planning Department was able to consult, showed that there was a 1-story detached commercial building on the property, which appeared to measure approximately 30 feet by 38 feet. The application proposes construction of a building 30 feet by 40 feet. It wasn't clear whether this would be a replacement of the building or simply an addition to the building. However, the department has no objection to this application since it is a continuing use. Thank you.
So, first question from the planning department, is it a replacement or?
His statement is totally incorrect. There is no building there. There are 3 trailers with one covering. It might look like a building, but there is no building on that lot. There are
All right.
6 trailers. 3 of the trailers have one covering over it, but they're 3 separate trailers that you go in and get tires and fix tires with, but there's no building on the lot. There are only trailers on that lot.
All
So
right.
that's incorrect.
So the building then will be new construction?
Yes,
It'll
it's
a
gonna be
30
one building on the side. It's a garage. I've been there, 0 degrees outside. They're fixing cars, they're changing tires, so they wanna have a garage so that they can still continue to do what they're doing, but they have a garage, because everything is out, kinda like outside.
All right, so just to be clear, the building that you're building is 30 feet by 40 feet?
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Do the trailers have permits?
Yes, we went through zoning, went to the fire department, and the trailers, they store tires in them. One of them they use it like for office, and it's like, it's just trailers. But they had to be supported. They had to have the fire, we went through the whole zoning thing, because they changed it. It was an M2, they became an I2. I don't know why it's an I2. I don't know nothing industrial around it. Everything around it is call outs and little things like that. But yes, the trailers are approved for, it's a non-conforming use, so we had to go through the whole inspection thing. So now we just want to put a garage there.
Okay. No.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, I
Yeah, go
guess
ahead.
that was the issue, is that automotive repair minor in a new structure would be a change in conditional use, even though the use itself was not changing. So typically, automotive repair, actually, it has to be done indoors. You can't do it outdoors. So there was probably an issue with that, and now.
Which is why we have it here today.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. So they'd be building a structure and then do that work indoors, which would be allowed. The building itself does not trigger any variances, so it's merely the continuation of the motor vehicle servicing use, which is making additional use in this district.
Okay.
Yeah, but you say motor vehicle, it's really tire repair. So people come in there with flat tires, they fix the tires and they drive away, or they tow the car in there. So it's not auto repair, it's tire, they put new tires on, they fix the tire, that's what they do.
Okay, all right. Any questions from the board?
No.
No? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, 2019-124, 1522 North Elamont Street. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Dwayne Clark.
Let's get you sworn in first.
Do swear me in.
Right, and do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Now that you're sworn in, would you state your name for the record, please?
Dwayne Clark.
Mr. Clark, we have this to use second floor as office, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, do we have staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department has reviewed this application, determined it would meet the criteria for neighborhood commercial establishment, and has no objection. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Clark, tell us a little bit about your project, and I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, and give us some indication of how you meet the neighborhood commercial establishment standards.
Well, first and foremost, I have some signatures from the community residents supporting the proposal. And what I'm trying to do is have a community outreach center.
Mm-hmm.
So we need basic needs in the neighborhood as far as drug rehabilitation and just personal things to try to help the residents in the neighborhood.
Okay. What's the history of this building especially? What's the history of the second floor of this building?
The second floor has been vacant. What I used to do is I used to use it for my supplies at the bottom of the store, but it hadn't been a residential. It hadn't been occupied for residential use for over probably about 20 years.
But it has been used for commercial purposes?
Yes.
Okay.
The first floor definitely still remained as a grocery store. I just need it upstairs for office space.
Okay, and the use for the second floor, for the commercial use for the second floor was storage of materials from your business?
Yeah, just for temporarily now, until I convert it into office space.
Okay. All right, any questions from the board?
No question.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
2019-127, 2000 Eastern Avenue. Ms. Hertzmark, you've already been sworn in. Let me get your client sworn in here.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Ms. Hertzmark, we have this to use first floor as restaurant and upper 2 floors as 2 dwelling units. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do we have staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department has reviewed this application, noted that this property would qualify for the proposed uses. However, it is within the Fells Point Historic District. For that reason, the department recommends approval of the application be subject to the condition that all exterior changes, including additions, demolitions, alterations, and signage, are completed in accordance with an authorization to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. Thank you.
And Ms. Hertzmark, if we were to approve your appeal, are those conditions acceptable?
Yes.
Thank you. Floor is yours.
So this project is an existing building located at the intersection of Eastern Avenue and South Washington Street. And the application is to convert this 3-story building to a first-floor restaurant use to be classified as a neighborhood commercial establishment, and 2 dwelling units, one on the 2nd floor, one on the 3rd floor. The neighborhood commercial establishment's a conditional use, and we're requiring variances for lot area and parking. The zoning classification is R8, and the site area is 848 square feet, which is entirely occupied by the building. The previous use on this site was a tavern with adult entertainment on the 1st and 2nd floors and 1 dwelling unit on the 3rd floor. The building's currently unoccupied. The surrounding uses are residential and neighborhood scale commercial. We had a pre-development meeting with the planning department on March 27th. And as Martin French mentioned, this is in a CHAP historic district, the Fells Point district. So the proposal for the restaurant use, the restaurant entrance would be off of Eastern Avenue, and the residential entrance would be from South Washington Street. As I mentioned, the restaurant use would be a neighborhood commercial establishment, and this project meets the definition of neighborhood commercial establishment because it has received prior approval for non-residential use, as evidenced by this certificate of occupancy from 2013, as well as the previous zoning cards. That's for the tavern with adult entertainment. So it meets the definition of neighborhood commercial establishment. The variance for minimum lot area is triggered by the dwelling unit. It's 750 square feet per dwelling unit. So for 2 dwelling units, we exceed the lot area provided. And a variance is required for 1 parking space, which is also for the increase in the intensity of the dwelling units. None is required for the neighborhood commercial establishment. The developer attended a community meeting with the Fells Point Task Force on March 27th, and our understanding is it was a very positive meeting. And he is also scheduled to attend another community meeting tomorrow evening with the Fells Prospect Community Association. So he has had ample communication with the community about this project. And so far, we've only heard positive things, and he's continuing his relationship with the community. So this site is unique in that it is an existing lot and an existing building to remain. It is also a historic district, and the building does fall within the review of CHAP. We are planning to meet all of the requirements of CHAP, including keeping the existing facade as required. For the parking variance, again, this is another street where there's no restricted permit parking, which we believe indicates that there is sufficient parking to serve the adjacent residences and this new proposed residence. There also are existing bus routes on Eastern Avenue and South Washington Street that serve the area. The conditional use of a restaurant will not be detrimental to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity. Rather, we actually think it's an improvement over the previously approved use of a tavern with adult entertainment in terms of its presence in a residential neighborhood. And it should be noted that that use would be grandfathered and allowed to continue. So we are instead coming in with a restaurant use, which we believe is more compatible with the neighborhood. We will comply with all of the standards in section 14-328 for the use standards for neighborhood commercial establishment, including the principal entrance is on Eastern Avenue. The site is pedestrian oriented, not automobile oriented. There's no drive-through. The use is limited to the building interior, and all signs will comply with the C1 district requirements. Currently, as I mentioned, the site is unoccupied, and so we believe that this use will be an improvement to the neighborhood. It'll reactivate this corner, and it'll promote pedestrian and commercial activity for this area.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions from the board?
No, sir.
No.
Thank you very much. 2019-129, 601 South Haven Street.
Last but not least.
Last but not least, you took the words out of my mouth.
Yes, for the first. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Martin Greenberg, on behalf of the applicant. Guys, stand up, come on.
Well, let's get anyone who's going to provide testimony sworn in before we get started here.
Raise your right hands, please. You swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. Ms. Hecker, would you state your name for the record now that we're on the record?
Yes, absolutely. Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Martin Greenberg, on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined by my colleague, Justin Williams, as well as Mark Levy, who's our developer applicant, and John Kraft, the engineer with Kimley Horn.
Great, Ms. Hecker, we have this to consolidate lots, subdivide into 73 lots, and to construct 70 new single-family row homes with private cross-access easement connections. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that is correct.
Great. We have staff reports?
Yes, thank you. Planning Department has certainly been working with the applicants concerning this proposed subdivision, as subdivision requires approval by the Planning Commission. The current use of the property is technically non-conforming, and therefore the proposed use would extinguish the non-conforming use of the property. The department is recommending approval of the application be subject to the condition that all of the redevelopment of this site is completed in accordance with the subdivision plan and development plan approved by the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Ms. Hecker, if we were to approve this, are those conditions acceptable to you?
Yes, they are.
Great. The floor is yours.
Thank you. With your permission, I'll proceed by way of a proffer, and our client and our engineer are certainly here to answer any questions that you might have. I've handed up a folder full of exhibits that I'll walk through briefly. The first thing that you'll see in the file is an aerial photo that puts the site in context. The property at 601 South Haven Street is located along Haven Street. It's sort of sandwiched between Haven Street and a railroad line. It was a former industrial property, and the second photo in that exhibit shows a little more of a close-up view. It used to be the Bruning Paint Factory. That building stood vacant for many, many years after the paint factory left. It really wasn't fit for an industrial purpose any longer. It was really an archaic building that couldn't be refitted for industrial uses. It was too narrow a site to put a new industrial building on. And as a result, during Transform Baltimore, we worked with the city council to have the property rezoned to R8. It's right in I guess this photo it also shows sort of what else is going on around this site. This property immediately to the east, this large site, is the Crown Cork and Seal site, which is going to be redeveloped eventually for a big mixed-use residential commercial project. The property's just north of Brewers Hill, which is this triangular parcel here. This site is the former Exxon refinery, which was recently purchased by Mark Saperstein and is also going to be developed for mixed uses. This is, this whole area is sort of changing from industrial to more residential commercial. So the second thing that you'll see in the file is an article from the BBJ about the redevelopment of the Crown Cork and Seal site, which is getting ready to get started, hopefully. As well as an existing conditions plan which shows what's there now. The existing, the Bruning Paint Factory building was demolished last year. So the site right now is cleared and is getting ready for this redevelopment. They're going through the voluntary cleanup program with the Maryland Department of the Environment. It'll need some environmental remediation, obviously, due to the past industrial uses. The property is also located along the Haven Street truck route, which I've included a map in the file of the city's truck routes. Again, the site is, although it is on an industrial truck route, it is in an area that is seeing a lot of change in terms of the type of uses that are going on around the property. And while it used to be an industrial site along with the other properties up and down Haven Street, this area really is becoming more residential and more commercial. The other thing that you'll see in the file is the Rails to Trails map, which shows the city's proposed green network plan to connect, to make a loop around the city that would be usable by hikers and bikers. And this site backs right up to that. The rail line that's in the rear of our property is right on this trail on the east side over here. And this residential project right next to the Rails to Trails route will be an asset both for the, thank you, for the residents and for the community at large. Thank you. As I said, we worked with the City Council during Transform Baltimore to have the site rezoned to the R8 zoning district, which is really more appropriate for this area. There's a letter in the file from the Brewers Hill Community Association in support of the rezoning. We've been working with their community association for the last several years on this project. And you'll see also a copy of the zoning map in the file showing the proposed new zoning. I would note on this, just for the record, you'll see there's a little tiny piece of purple, a little piece of I-2 that runs into the site. This is a little piece of the Canton Railroad. We're in the process of acquiring that from the state. That should close by the end of June, at which point we'll have that piece rezoned to R8 to conform to the rest of the property. But because we don't control it yet, we can't do that yet. So with regard to the actual project, it is 70 townhouse units. There's a site plan in the file that was submitted with our application. A copy of the landscape plan is also included. There are 70 townhouses. The landscape plan will show there's a series of street trees that are proposed. I think there's 74 street trees around the site, really greening it up from what is there now. There are also a copy of the proposed building elevations. We have not yet selected a builder for the project, but this is likely to be very similar to other new townhouse construction projects that have occurred in the area recently. I know the project at O'Donnell Square that NV Ryan did recently has done very, very well. They're one of the builders we're talking to. We haven't selected a builder, as I said, but they're likely to be in that same style. We are proposing a greatly increased number of parking spaces beyond what is required by the zoning code. There are 134 parking spaces on the individual lots, plus 18 spaces on the street. So for 70 units, it is an excess of parking. That was something that the community was very concerned about. They didn't want folks who were coming to this project to end up spilling over into the existing residential community and creating a parking problem for them. So we were sure to provide plenty of off-street parking on our site to serve these homes. You'll see in the file that the last thing in there is a red line site plan, which just has a minor tweak from what the original version was. That's a result of final engineering, what we've done with stormwater management. The red line plan you'll see swaps a house that was located on lot 65 that was over in this corner, is now going to be located here on lot 28, which was originally proposed to be a stormwater facility. Due to the grades and the various technical issues we've had with the engineering of the stormwater facilities, we've discovered that they work better as one big facility over in the corner as opposed to having one kind of in the middle of the site. So we swapped out a house that was over here and moved it over into this line. So this is the version of the plan that is the version that we're requesting approval of. So on this plan, the variances and the various approvals that we need are as follows. We're applying for maximum impervious surface in the rear yard to be 100% on lots 1 through 43. This is these lots right here that run through along Alley A. These townhouses are rear loaded. They are accessed in the rears, which is along this alley. They have garages that come off the alley. And the property line runs right down the middle of the alley. So each house on either side has half the alley technically, and they have a easement across it for everyone's use. But because there's no yard there, there's no grass or green space or pervious surface area, this does require a 100% lot area, rear yard impervious surface coverage variance. And then the second variance that we need is for rear yard setbacks. For these lots, again, across the middle here, it's a 15-foot rear yard setback that we're providing. A 20-foot setback is required. What we're doing is we're pulling the houses back off of Haven Street, so that prevents us from being able to provide the 20-foot rear yard, but it allows us to buffer the Haven Street truck route a little bit. If we were to push the houses up right on front of Haven Street, we could provide the 20-foot rear yard, but we think it's better that we pull them back a little bit so that those houses aren't right there on the truck route that will run up and down Haven Street. And then the other variances for rear yard are these lots in the back here. They have 5-foot rear yards. They back up to what is the bed of Iris Street, which is owned by the Norfolk Southern Railroad and will be part of the Rails to Trails trail line that will run all around the city through that green network plan that I showed you. So as a practical matter, while they only have technically a 5-foot rear yard, they'll overlook a large trail, hiker-biker trail, which will make it appear to be spacious. There won't be another building backing right up to them. And then finally, the other approval that we are requiring for this project is conditional use approval for the height of the buildings. The houses are proposed to be 45 feet in height. 35 feet is allowed by right. 45 feet can be approved as a conditional use where the houses front on streets that are at least 30 feet wide. Here, all of our streets are at least 40 feet wide, so they're eligible for that conditional use approval. And again, they've gone through a design review process with the planning department, and everyone is comfortable with the design of the buildings to the extent that the height of the building would be problematic for anyone. It would only be problematic for folks whose views might be obstructed by taller buildings. Here, this site is very self-contained. We're not obstructing any of the existing homes in Brewers Hill in terms of their visibility or anything. They're further west of this site on the other side of Haven Street. So there's really no adverse impact by approving an additional 10 feet in height for the townhouses. With that, I've submitted an outline that addresses the various legal standards that the board's required to consider. I can walk through them one by one if you'd like, but with that, I would submit the outline for your consideration and request that you approve the variances and the conditional use. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the board?
It's an exciting project.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And we are off the record.
Did you get the word?
Ma'am? Come on up.
I saw that while I was sitting there. I got that article.
Maybe it was another show.
Because we need an extra in Baltimore City. We needed more.
Now, hold on 1 second. I mean, which case were you here for?
Yes, I was late for.
Wait, guys, hold on a second.
I'm sorry, so I was late for 2019111, please, Chestnut Avenue.
Was consent.
All right, let's go back on the record.
We had a gentleman that signed in opposition to this.
Oh.
We need to postpone it.
Yeah, we need, unfortunately, ma'am, someone signed in opposition and that person is gone, so we're gonna have to call you back on another day.
Yes. Okay, so,
So-
what should I do?
We'll,
Your names, we are on the record. Come on to the mic.
yeah, come on up.
Yes, please.
What's your name?
My name is Nadnada Stephen. Yes, please.
Okay.
You have to spell that for me.
Pardon
Spell
me?
your name.
Natnutada.
Well, N-A-T-N-A.
Tda.
Okay, so,
Your last name?
Stephen, Stevens.
Ms. Stevens, so you were not here when we called your case, and as I understand it, someone has signed in opposition to your case. That person needs an opportunity, that person is not here now. So that person needs an opportunity to be heard, so we will postpone your case from today. We'll try to get you in the next 2 weeks or as soon as we can.
Yes.
And if you want, you can call the zoning office, and that number is 410-396.
Yes, please.
396-4301.
So just call this number and contact the person.
Yes,
and-
Mr. Baumgartner right here.
So we will reissue the posting notice for that property, so you'll have to keep it posted for an additional 14 days. But then we can get you back on the docket on, is it May 21st? But call us so we can then reissue that posting notice.
Yes, so call to this number. Yes.
Tomorrow morning.
Yes. I apologize for that. I just misrecord on May 9th.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, now we're off the record.
Miss Steve? Just want to confirm that this is your